Okay.
So welcome everybody. No introduction. We're just going to get right into it. Jennifer,
All
take it
right.
away.
So, so my colleague, Kate Berman, talked a little bit, I think just coincidentally, about what I might consider a contemplative practice, where she talked about taking a walk and then thinking and reflecting as doing the walk. And so I think that there were bits and pieces of her poster and what she presented that dovetail nicely to what I'm going to talk about here. And so what I'm going to focus on are the use of contemplative practices in courses, and done in a way where students can learn not just about the course material and information, but about themselves. And I think that for a lot of courses, that is an unspoken goal that we have, is that we want our students to come out of those courses having a better, deeper, clearer understanding of themselves and their positions about whatever material we're covering in the course, be it criminology, which is my discipline and Kate's discipline, or if it's something else. And so I've been thinking about this for a while, and started doing some research and reading about just how can we get students to be more engaged, to come away from the course with those things that we want, both written and unwritten. And so in this session, what I hope to be able to do for you is just to introduce contemplative practices. And so this isn't a deep dive by any stretch of the imagination. It's really just kind of a soft introduction into what those practices are and what they might look like for you in your discipline and your courses. Um, I want to see if we can try to explore how these practices could be employed in different types of courses. So outside of criminology or sociology, or the ologies at all, maybe. Could we see this working in classes like art or music or mathematics even? I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the benefits that I've seen and that are reported from the use of these practices in higher education. And learning, I'm hoping you can learn or see how using these practices can assist in achieving course outcomes. So these are the kind of the things that I'm hoping to get through today in the amount of time that we have here. So first, let's start with just kind of a really quick introduction to contemplative practices. And I mean really quick, really easy, and I'm hoping really kind of digestible. So one thing that I had to kind of learn when I was thinking about this, and was just what it was called, that thing that I was thinking about, the thing that I wanted, that it had a name. So I had to kind of figure out what that was. And it turns out that it's contemplative pedagogy and then contemplative practices. And so then I had to learn what that is. So according to Columbia University, which has an amazing Center for Teaching and Learning, it's an approach to teaching and learning with the goal of encouraging deep learning through focused attention, reflection, and heightened awareness. And I know for sure that these are things that are not just focused within my discipline, that these are things that are of interest for people across our campus and just across disciplines in general. And then I wanted to know if I was going to be using it for the right things, right? So why would we use it? We can use this type of approach to address different teaching and learning challenges. And even if you've been in the classroom for a minimal amount of time, or if you've been in the classroom for several years like myself, you still have these teaching and learning challenges that kind of surface from semester to semester. And I know that's true right now because we are living in the era of COVID, and so nothing is like it's used to be, right? So we are dealing with new challenges on top of existing challenges. And so I think that this might be a way that we can kind of address some of the old and new challenges that we are facing in our classroom. So some of the challenges that we can get addressed here would be student distraction or anxiety. And I know that's something that's come up a lot as we're teaching remotely, or we're teaching hybrid, or we're doing any manner of modalities, that we have a lot of issue with student distraction and anxiety. Superficial learning. I know this has been a concern for me since I started teaching, and I know it's a concern for colleagues, that we want to get beyond that superficial layer, that just memorization layer. Like, we want to get students to get deeper into the material. We can use it to address rigid thinking. And this is something that is ever present in my discipline, where students come in expecting things to kind of be one way and they think one thing about it. And in order to get them to move even just a little bit, we have to be a little bit more creative with what we're offering them in terms of opportunities to do that thinking and that work. We can use it when we are struggling for students to connect personally to the material. So when we want to have students see how the course material relates to their daily lives, this is a way that we can do that. This also is of a particular experience and concern that I've had over my years, which is where students are motivated by grades rather than by learning. And this isn't to say that using these techniques is going to be the miracle cure, right, to all things, but it does give an opportunity for students to step out of simply thinking about their grade and step into thinking about the material and the learning. And I have found that to be really a thing that's possible when these kind of techniques are embraced. So this isn't just focused on the learner or the student. There are benefits for the instructor as well. There are reasons why an instructor might choose to do that. And students aren't the only one that have a lot of things going on in their life. And I think that these practices and this approach helps instructors stay focused and stay present in the moment. And it helps us to stay fully engaged in teaching and learning. And so when I was able to kind of access this information, it spoke to me in a way that said, you know, like, this is exactly the thing that I'm looking to do in my courses. And why not give it a try and see if I'm right that this could work. So there is kind of like the seminal work in contemplative practices in higher education, and it's called Contemplative Practices in Higher Education. And so they have some objectives of these practices that I'm going to share with you just briefly here. Focus on in attention building. So that's something that contemplative practices want to do, is to help students with their focus and with their attention. Contemplation and introspection. And I think that maybe sometimes we don't give students credit for the ability to do that, but they are very capable of thinking deeply about whatever it is we want them to think about. We just have to give them the opportunity and the space to do that. Here, what I have in bold is that these are kind of the reasons that I selected it, and these are some of the things that I used or I looked for and designed for in my course, to make personal connections to course material and to deepen understanding of the material. And so that is what I wanted students to be able to do in the course that I'm going to talk a little bit about today. Compassion and connection to others. So again, this may not be something that's relevant to you and to your courses, but for me and my discipline and the courses that I teach in criminology, this was important for me to be able to tap into, or have students tap into, their compassion and their connection to others because of the things that students are going to be doing once they graduate with this degree, right? So if they want to go into different services in the legal system, whether it be courts or law enforcement or victim services or offender services, they're going to need, I think, that compassion and that connection to others. And I thought this was a way that students could start to tap into that as well. They can, these practices can delve into inquiry into nature of their minds, personal meaning, creativity, and insight. So those are the things, these things here in bold, that really were the focus, I think, of the course that I'm going to speak to you about. And it's not just this course, I'm weaving them through my other courses as well, but this one course is where I went into it planning to do those things. Okay. So another question that I had when I was thinking about this, or is just learning about contemplative practices. And so one thing that I discovered as I was reading about it is that they can be big or they can be small. So don't think that you have to do these things, or you want to do these things and it has to be some big grand event, right? It doesn't have to be this semester long activity. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about how it can be that, but that you can also introduce these practices in small ways throughout your courses across a semester. These practices can be combined. So it isn't just that you have to do one thing and that's the only thing. They are able to be delivered together. And by doing that, you come away, I think, with a better experience for students. So don't think that it has to be a huge thing. Don't think that it can only have to be one thing. You can combine these together. I really think they can be used in any discipline. And they include things like movement, which is what I was thinking about when Kate was talking, creativity. They can be what we're going to talk about just in just a little bit, relational, activist, or stillness. And so what I want to move to next is just talking about and showing you the tree that will show up whenever you do a search for contemplative practices. I'm sure that you will see this particular image. So I'm hoping that this is something that is somewhat familiar if you've ever just typed in contemplation and teaching and contemplation in college or higher education. This is something that might have come up. And so what you can see here are these different branches. And these different branches include ritual, movement, relational, activist, creative, generative, and stillness. And so for me, as I'm looking through these different branches, I'm seeing kind of obvious connections to different things. So I'm seeing music, art, dance, writing, composition, health, wellness. I see religion, philosophy. I see community organizing, communication, education, psychology, social work. I can see these different branches being connected to each of those different disciplines. And so I think that what's important is that we think not just narrow, but we think, well, this can't possibly work in a music class. No, it absolutely can work in a music class. Well, how would I get this in a math class? And I think that it does take a little bit of creativity, but I do think that this tree of contemplative practices can speak to any discipline in multiple courses. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about what criminology is, what restorative justice is, and just so that you have a little baseline for what we're talking about here. Many people think that criminology and criminal justice are the same. They are not. In criminology, we focus on how and why laws work, how they're made, why they're broken, and society's response to that. And that can include several different aspects of crime and the response to crime and consequences of crime. So it isn't just focusing on the system, it's focusing on all kinds of things connected to crime. Restorative justice seems to be something that would be in conflict with criminology, but in actuality, I think it actually complements it. And so restorative justice, just really quickly, is an approach to harm, and that would include crime, that seeks to involve the victim, the offender, and the community. And so it is not required to be used with or within the system, but it can be. And so I think that you can see why I would want to maybe include contemplative practices within my courses because of the nature of the discipline. And as I said earlier, the nature of the work that students are going to be doing when they leave, I think requires some time for reflection and thought and contemplation. And so when I was teaching this course and designing this course for the first time, I thought that it was a good fit. And I think that the nature of the subject matter is important when selecting a course. Like for me, in order to understand restorative justice, there's some things students need to be able to do. They need to be able to understand themselves, their beliefs, their biases. They need to be able to reflect on what is influencing each of those. They need to be able to critique society and institutions. And that isn't something that comes easy if you've never done it before. And so I think that we needed to have an opportunity to give them space to learn how to do that. And so when I was designing the course, I did that. This course included topics and issues that students needed to address more personally than perhaps other courses, because I think that to some degree restorative justice is personal, and it's important that students, again, be given the time and the space to do the reflection. And we often think that students can do that away from us outside of the classroom, and I made the determination that that really was not going to work, and so we were going to do a lot of that in class face-to-face. My experience with teaching the subject matter also drove me to including contemplative practices in the course. Knowing restorative justice, knowing what it's about, knowing some of the challenges that I faced trying to teach this course content before, I realized I needed to do something a little different, a little bit more intentional with more purpose, and this was a way to do that. There are things you need to know about restorative justice. but it isn't just about facts to be memorized. And I think that's true for a number of courses, that we would want to get our students beyond just memorizing facts and to engage in the material deeper. And again, this is a way that we can get that to happen. For me, learning is about engaging deeply with the material, and I know that it is for other people in other courses. And the goals of the course is one other reason that I selected this course to kind of intentionally input contemplative practices. So the course was a 3,000 level course, and you can see here that what's in bold are some of the learning outcomes that I think are directly connected to contemplative practices. And so again, as I was designing the course and looking at the outcomes, I was always thinking about ways that I could introduce contemplative practices within the course as we proceeded from the start to the end of the semester. And so I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the practices that I used in this 3,000 level course. So like I said, you can be big or small, so I focused on both. And the practices can be short-term and long-term. And so I did both of those as well. So when you think about the tree, so stillness, relational, and creative, I used those particular things. And they manifested themselves through this nonprofit RJ organization that was local in the Newburgh community that made multiple visits to the course. And what this organization did was that it actually had students participate in a restorative justice circle. And all you really kind of need to know about that is that it is exactly what it sounds like, where we sit in a circle and then we share different parts of our lives and different experiences depending on what it is we want to talk about. And so outside of the classroom, that could be anything from what a young person has done in terms of damaging some property, all the way to something more significant and severe. So this was kind of a practice about for our students to learn about what a real circle would be like. And it was a real circle in that we engaged with each other in the same way that you would in a circle outside of that. And so they came in, they ran the circle, they did some guest lectures. And when you're looking at kind of the leaves on that tree, there was silence, there was centering, there was deep listening, there was storytelling, there was dialogue, and then there was journaling. So students had the opportunity to share or pass, but I will say that all of the students shared. I participated as well. And we listened to each other's stories. We listened to the dialogue that we shared with each other and exchanged with each other, and then we wrote about those experiences later. The other thing that I would say would be that the course had creative and relational aspects to it. And here, what that kind of looked like was the start of the class short writing, a QQC at the end, and then they did journals, and then they did a long form journal. And so the start of the class short writing exercise was literally 3 to 5 minutes where they had a prompt and they just wrote. There wasn't any concern about grammar or structure. It's just, here's the thing that I want you to think about, and I'm going to give you 3 to 5 minutes to do that. And it actually kind of calmed the class. It centered the class. It focused us for what we were going to do that day. And I did that every day. So every day that we met, we had a start of the class writing. That was 3 to 5 minutes on either something that we were directly going to talk about that day, something that came up in the news or outside of class that's relevant to class, something from a journal or something that I read from a student that sparked it, or something from the last class that I just wanted to revisit. So every day, that's what we did. That's how we started every class. We ended every class with something called the QQC, which is a question, quote, or comment. And we did that at the end of every class. So it was a way to kind of reflect on the day's class meeting and the day's material. And it was really, really short, really sweet. So students would do all three, a question that they had about the material, a quote from something in the class that day, and then a comment about that. And I will say that I provided journals for students, notebooks for students to do this in. So I would give them out at the end, at the start, collect them at the end. And those were just something between me and the student, and I would give them comments from day to day or week to week. They did periodic journals, which were longer in form, and they did 4 or 5 of those, and then they did the long form journal, which is what I'm going to talk a little bit more about next.
You want to take a couple questions now,
Sure,
Jennifer?
absolutely.
So Maureen asked, how did these activities tie to the student learning outcomes for the course?
There were the outcomes where they talked about describing the key components of restorative justice. There would be things where I asked about aspects of restorative justice. For example, I asked them just to write about what they thought justice meant. And so we revisited that about 3 weeks because that's a real heavy content. There were outcomes tied to analyzing the appropriateness of restorative justice for juvenile offenders. And so I would structure a question where we talked about what would be some of the challenges with doing that, and students would write about that. So I was intentional in looking at making sure that the course covered obviously all of those outcomes, and making sure that my prompt at the start of the day had something tied to those areas.
And then Allison asked, given the intensity of experiences that your students may have had in this class, did you take any steps to make sure that they were aware and encouraged to make use of on-campus counseling or other campus mental health services if they felt they needed extra support to work what they experienced in the class?
Yes, we talked a lot about the prep for the circle, and then we debriefed a great deal about the circle. And I was always sure to tell students that they had access to those resources on campus, but also that if they didn't feel comfortable with on-campus resources, that we had partners off campus that we could connect them to. And I think that that's a good point because particularly in this class, that was going to be a relevant issue because the nature of things that would come up and things that did come up. And that may not be the case if you're doing something like this in different types of classes. So you do want to take care for that. And I was sure to let students know that they had access to those resources.
Great. And that was it.
Okay. Thank you. I love questions. All right. So this was the long form reflection assignment. This was the end of the semester assignment. And this was designed specifically for students to reflect on the course material, to review their thinking about the course material, to find personal connections to the material, determine what, if anything, had changed over the semester. And so I don't think that we spend time in our courses actually asking students to make those kind of backward connections. I think that sometimes maybe we take for granted that they're going to do that, but I wanted to make sure that students were going to do that. So I built it into the assignment for the end of the semester that students would be able to have that opportunity to look back and to reflect and to evaluate where they started in terms of their thinking and their feeling, and if that had changed throughout the semester as information was unveiled to them and as they learned more about the course topics. I gave them 4 prompts to choose from when they were putting together the assignment, and I think that's important that students have those options so that they don't feel hemmed in or stuck. And then I required that they use their previous writing in the long form assignment. So students had to go back through their journals, through the start of the class writing, through their QQCs, and they had to incorporate that information into this kind of last long form assignment. And by doing that, it helped decrease the likelihood that students, well, eliminated it. They couldn't avoid looking at where they were in August compared to where they were in December. And I think that that intentionality worked in the favor of the students in the class and the assignment because they just couldn't avoid it. They had to. And it actually allowed them to see how and if they had changed and how and if these different activities and these different assignments really impacted what they thought about whatever topic they were going to choose to write about. Okay. So here were the 4 prompts. So they could choose to write about or demonstrate their changing thought about a course topic. They could showcase some critical thinking about a course topic. They could present examples of possible solutions. to some of the issues and problems discussed about RJ and juveniles, and they could provide some insight into, they could write about things that provided some insight into who they were or are, what they believed, and what they wanted for the world as it related to course topics. And so I gave them these prompts and then realized, like you naturally do, that you needed to provide just a little bit more detail and context because they just kind of didn't know a way in for some of it. And so what I'm going to show now are just examples, I think, of 2 of these 4. So I have a couple of student examples on demonstrating their changing thought about a course topic and providing some insight into who they are, what they believed, and then what they want for the world as it related to the course topics. So as I mentioned, the original prompt you see there in bold, and then it became apparent that I needed to provide a little bit more detail and guidance. And so I developed these other questions to kind of give students a way in. And so I asked them to think about what course topics were consistent in the writing as they looked across the semester, what changed and how they thought about this course topic. And then I told them they were going to have to think about this and they were going to have to look at their own writing. And then I wanted them to think about maybe what caused the change in their thinking about this particular topic. So I'm going to show you a couple of examples of students who did this. And so this is one student's response. So you can see that the student started talking about a previous assignment, an early assignment, and then I just bolded the now so that you could see that she actually did address how she had changed from earlier in the semester to now. And this particular response, I think, highlights key concepts of restorative justice, analyzing their beliefs, and the student kind of demonstrated moving beyond the description of RJ and basics to thinking, I think, deeply and critically about it. And then we have another example here. The student just flat out said, like, here are 2 ways where I see change, and she gave those. And then she talked about another area where she saw a change, which was thinking about justice. And she said, at first, this is what I thought. And then today, I still think that it's more complex and nuanced, but I think it also means this. And so you can see, I think, the student learning about themselves and really taking the time to look at and think about what justice means to them, why it meant that, and then after being given opportunities to think about that, what it means to them now. The other prompt that I want to show an example or 2 for is this last one, which is provide some insight into who you are, what you believe, or what you want for the world. What did you discover or uncover about yourself through learning about restorative justice in juveniles? What's important about what you learned this semester in terms of your major or your minor, in terms of yourself, the broader community, in terms of future employment or volunteer work? So I really wanted to give them something, again, like an easy way into the question. And so we have a couple of responses here that I'm going to show. I'll show to you.
Just, Jennifer, there's 4 minutes left.
I got it. This student thought that she was pretty consistent, but then she acknowledged that she was a little disappointed because she wanted to be able to do something that she didn't know she would be able to do, but she sees that I think there's a point of improvement or involvement or growth, I would say, for her. So here I think that we're showing key concepts of RJs, analyzing personal beliefs and attitudes, and learning about themselves. And then one more, I think. I think that this one is a really good highlight about just learning about themselves and them demonstrating that. And I think that the student is talking about how he thought one way about his classmates and that changed after we participated in the circle. And I thought this last point here, how we treat each other matters. And if we at the individual level can't change how we treat each other, how do we expect an entire system to change, is a really, 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 really good point. Okay, I'm gonna go to benefits. So I think that there are several different benefits. I think there are benefits for the classroom environment, particularly for relationships between the instructor and the student and between students, as was evidenced, I think, in that last student response. A deeper understanding of the course material, more focus, less distraction, ability for students to self-assess their learning, the student connection to course material, to course outcomes. The students are, I think, able to better see how what we're doing is connected to those course outcomes that we lay out for them early in the semester. The personal connection to course material, I think, is key. Like, it was key to this, and they were able to do that in really deep and meaningful ways. So I think that the benefits aren't just for the students, they're for the instructor as well. And then the last slide that I have here are just for helpful resources. So I know that when I was starting out trying to find different things, that it took a while for me to kind of pinpoint things. And so I just wanted to kind of pass those along. And so we have 1 minute left. So if there are any questions, I'm happy to entertain those.
There are two in the chat.
Okay.
So someone asked how to maybe modify this approach to an asynchronous online environment.
Oh my
Do you have
goodness.
a-
I think that the journaling would work. I mean, the journals, the students did periodic journals that were like 2 to 3 paragraphs, at like 4 or 5 different points throughout the semester. I think that is something that's easily transferable because they did that through our learning management system.
Mhm.
And so I think that that's an easy way to do just a small form of that. And I will also say that I'm having students right now, I'm teaching synchronously, but they are doing a question, quote, comment every Friday that they're just using discussion forums to do. And so I just put up the discussion forum and then they do the question, the quote, and the comment, and it's super easy for them to navigate. It's super easy for me to get through and to read and to comment. And so I think those are 2 examples that you could do really easy asynchronously.
And then the last comment as we start to make the switch to the next presentation, and this is a really good one, that's why I want to make sure it gets asked, is how do you deal with students who are resistant or feel coerced into thinking critically concerning issues about what they have already decided? So that's a very good question.
That is a very good question. And I had something in here about what to expect. And one of the things I had under that, which I took out, was resistance. You have to expect resistance. I think that you ask students to trust you and to just give it a little bit of time and to be honest in their writing. So whatever it is they want to write about, I tell them I don't judge what they write, but I will give them comments back. And they're not critical comments. It's just more like, okay, I see your point, but what about this thing? Or I totally see how you got there, but have you thought about this thing? And so it's to encourage them that they really can write whatever they want within the parameters of the prompt, and they, they have to be respectful in what they're writing. But I'm not here looking for confirmation of my own beliefs. I'm really interested in what they think when they're asked that question. And I think after a while, they do get to that point and it becomes more of an exchange where they actually will leave me notes in the notebooks and then I write them back. And so time, I think, is the best way.
Well, thank you very much. That was a
You're welcome.
great presentation. And,
Thank you.
if you're going to stick around and anybody else has questions, of course, you can continue to engage in the chat if you'd like, if you can stick around.
Yeah, I have a few more
But
minutes before my next
cool.
class.
All right, great.
Thank you so
Thank you
much.
so much. Thank you, Jennifer. We're all
Thanks.
clapping.
Thank you.
All right, we're going to take a little bit of a turn here towards using Zotero. So Dakin and Lisa from Cortland are going to talk about using it to promote evidence-informed teaching. And I believe I've made them both co-hosts, and I'm going to actually stop the recording.